Hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast, The Biggest Trends Driving Information Technology and IT Services in 2025. I'm Greg Rabine, and I help cyber solution providers scale using AI powered systems so they can grow revenue predictably. And I'm pleased to introduce today's guest, Sunny Das Dosanjh, CEO and co founder of Dosanjh USA Inc. And today we'll explore how organizations can align their AI ambitions with the reality of governance, compliance, and risk management. So before I turn the mic over to Sunny, let me just run through the topics for today. So we'll start off with having Sunny introduce himself and tell us about his background, his experience, and journey. And then we'll explore trends Sunny is seeing in the industry. And we'll talk about opportunities and challenges. And we'll wrap things up with Sunny's thoughts on where things are headed. So, Sunny, thanks so much for joining this morning.
The honor is all mine, Greg, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a few thoughts. By way of introduction, Sonny, military nickname is Das. Dosanjh is my last name, so Dosanjh USA is the company name. I go by acronym DUSA, keeps it easy. Been in Silicon Valley 30 years, and kind of seen it all from the initial, before the web browsers. We used to work on mainframe to what we call dumb terminals or X terms in the 80s, to client servers in the 90s, to went to cloud in the 2000s, and then we went to distributed architectures. So from a network, from an application, from a data set, from streaming video, to multi-domains, to how is the experience actually realized at the endpoints where the customer, client, or the user is. So to have that holistic approach has taken me about 30 plus years to get a real good understanding of how technology fits to a driver, some kind of a value-oriented mission. So I've been at the forefront of that, cutting edge here in Silicon Valley, been fortunate to be around a lot of smart people, way smarter than me, who have done really well, the movers and shakers, from Mr. Packard, Dave Packard, all the way down to some of the current CEOs that you see out there. So glad to be part of the journey and share our perspective of where DUSA sees things going.
No, that's terrific, and your background is super impressive, and and you've seen lots of the trends over the years and the emerging technologies. I also started in IT in the '90s and saw a lot of those myself, and so it's really exciting where things have gone. The funniest story I'll tell real quickly. I remember when I was little in the '60s, and we had a babysitter who would come over, and when she came over, her boyfriend always brought us a gift. So one day, as a little kid, you're always trying to, okay, where can I get things my parents won't give me. So he would always bring us a little gift, a little trinket, and this is in the '60s. So I asked him, "Can you bring me a Dick Tracy watch?" It's unbelievable that back in the '60s, this was something that you never thought would be reality, and today it is.
It is. It's amazing to see. I'm a Star Trek, Lord of the Rings kind of guy. So I live in a sci-fi fantasy world as a young kid from the '60s, and watching the space programs evolved into things becoming a reality. And after my stint in the U.S. Air Force, and I was humbled enough to go to San Jose State, GI Bill, and really be around the pioneers in the early '90s of Silicon Valley of when we call up dial-up modems. We had no idea what networks were going to evolve, how IT infrastructures were going to be evolved into what they are today, and what applications were going to be derived. Because we were just paving the roads, if you will. We had no idea what vehicles were going to be on there and the payloads, to use an analogy. Today, I'm excited. I'm excited about the younger generation. of the sky's the limit or space. If you go into that wild blue yonder, to use an Air Force line, but to be a contributor, to be a leader in certain aspects, and to be humbled by what the technology can do for good, as well as for entertainment, and then just making lives easier. It's an exciting time. It's an exciting time.
I agree, and it's fascinating how science fiction, sci-fi, has become reality, and is fascinating. And but I agree with you. Technology being used for mankind, the betterment, and making lives better, right? And I absolutely agree with that. So, yeah, I see you're out in San Jose, and it's always wonderful for me to be able to go out there. I'm in New York City, and which I'm sure is a place where you have lots of activity.
But yeah, I have a great affinity to New York City. In my younger days, but it's also a part of, especially if I look at New York from the financial side, the financial sector, obviously Wall Street. When I look at LA as far as entertainment, as I go around the country and look at the different vertical markets, I've been involved in about 15 to 20 vertical markets. What I mean by that is industries. New York City is obviously the hub of the financial world, but as you go hopscotch around the world and you see the impact and you see how information is being shared, now you're seeing a commonality. And then distance doesn't mean anything. Time is getting shorter and shorter when we talk about nanoseconds. There's a lot of opportunity to communicate from a central location like New York City, but decentralize it to, let's say, London or Frankfurt or Tokyo, so on and so forth. And therein lies not only the opportunity to share good information, but bad actors can also start to infiltrate that at warp speed, if I may use a Star Trek line.
No, I agree, and it's amazing our world, our remote world, but it's not really remote. It's just that
Hmm.
I mean people are, I mean, they're just located all over, so there's just no boundaries. I mean, it is certainly a borderless world, but then again, the bad actors are certainly out there, and that's been like that since the beginning of time, right? The good and the bad. So
It has, in the context of this conversation, when we look at GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, things like that. I'm sure you remember because of last week, 9/11. Before 9/11, we were just building the internet or intranets, and we were just trying to move content or information or data, file sharing, early days of video streaming before YouTube and Netflix, but we didn't really have a strong onus on cybersecurity. It was after 9/11. I was in the thick of it. We changed our company name to Blue Coat Systems. We became the number one proxy in the world for filtering and evaluating, breaking apart SSL packets. What you see is that HTTPS. Nowadays we're looking at, probably something like HTTPQ for quantum or quantum resilience, I should say. So we're always pushing the envelope of okay, now we understand there's a need for security. To your point, there's bad actors out there, but how do you do that? How do you start to bolt on things, if I may use the analogy of an aircraft in flight? Now you got to put security measures on it. It's already in flight. The networks are already built. The applications have already been designed. Let's say Salesforce or ServiceNow or Workday, to pick on a few. Now you got to bolt on security. The opportunity is to do security by design, to take in governance, regional, let's say, European rules and regulations versus Asia Pacific versus North America, and at state level, not just at government or territory or geography, but that's where you now get into really granularity of then how do you accomplish that? What is the risk tolerance, and what do we actually have to be compliant with? As an example, HIPAA in the healthcare industry is different than the financials. So to look at that and to have a take a step back and look at your architecture, a lot of people are scratching their head. They go, "Where do I even start?" And so folks like me who have kind of been around the block a few times, that's our perspective is that we see the macro as well as the micro. And that's where like a couple of trends that we're looking at is where DUSA will place our bets on.
Yeah, and it's interesting how things have changed. Back when, after 9/11, I was working for a IBM software group, and one of my accounts, one of the largest shipping companies in the world. It was amazing. Their executive team, the head of security, there was one person in security. One. Like unbelievable. And I'll never forget this comment by an executive, a C-level executive at one of the Wall Street firms. And I like the way you use I use Wall Street firm also. But he said something to the effect of most 95% of all of the alerts we get at this top five Wall Street firm, a non-technical layperson can handle. It's the two or three a year from a nation state that has me worried.
That would be true. I look at the financials in New York. I did a lot of them. A lot of your probably the top, what we would call the Fortune 100s. I got the architectures in my brain because I mapped out the infrastructure when we were trying to, as my analogy, when we're trying to bolt on security, then we had software defined networks. We were overlaying, virtualizing them. And then we went into collapsing layers in the cloud. So we are not doing a lift and shift from on-premise going into cloud. You had to do cloud native application design. A lot of your SaaS companies that came up, like the Salesforce and the ServiceNow and Workdays. But as you start to look at distributed architecture and you move compute to the edge, to the endpoints, that one security person usually didn't have the tool set or the budgets to extend their policies, not just from the firewalls and to the cloud, but to the endpoint. So you had these disparate tools, different technologies coming into play. Technology was evolving now with mobile applications, not just web applications or legacy applications. And to go to the CIO or to the CEO and get budget approval, when the vendors here in Silicon Valley, we were figuring it out in real time also. So how do you put a security mesh that can protect your organization, protect your partners, because the ecosystem's expanded too. That's what I call the back door. And if you look at the threats, to your point, they came through back channels. A lot of them come through the service and support, the vendors who were not vetted, who were not validated, who have access to your logs, where passwords are in the clear. They come through that back channel, not the front door where your customer-facing applications are, but it's your IT systems on the back end. And so I saw it for decades where you would have a lot of money thrown at, or budget thrown at the front end applications because that's your revenue driver that keeps the lights on, that keeps your business value that you provide to your clients. But there was a minuscule amount paid to the back end, and unfortunately, we're playing catch up. So you've got multiple tools doing the same thing on the front end and the back end. You're paying double the cost, and you're not as secure as you think you are.
I understand. So now, as things evolved, right, and we talked a little bit about that, but today, secure AI and quantum resilient communication. So we hear a lot about generative AI co-pilots, but you emphasize secure and quantum resilient communication. Why do you believe this is one of the most critical trends shaping IT in 2025?
It's something that I've been looking at for 15 years from the quantum mechanical space when you look at compute. But in the last 4 years, with NIST, putting out that challenge out to the community to say, how do we protect against cyber attacks that are quantum derived? So they got ahead of it. They had the competition. They narrowed it down to crystals of lithium. They've changed the acronyms to which algorithm are you going to use that will safeguard your data against a quantum attack. So what I mean by that is quantum resilience. So we're basically going to replace the PKI, the public key infrastructure, your public key and private key. So where are those used? from your web browser, from your mobile phone, from an endpoint that may be communicating to a server or a cloud. So that channel, that encapsulation, even on the message bus, on the cloud itself or on the endpoint, you're going to have to gradually replace the public key infrastructure and use a quantum resilient algorithm, which NIST has approved. Now, the repercussions there are twofold. Number one is you've reduced your risk. So when the bad actors steal your data and they can't break the lock today, they will be able to break the lock in about 4 or 5 years when quantum computers become a little more stable and mainstream. So there's a whole shift going right now where they're calling it harvest now, collect your data, and we'll break the lock later when we have the compute. So in order to encrypt the data today, you need a quantum resilient algorithm. So that's what NIST has approved to start encrypting your data, encrypting the networks, encrypting the databases, securing the applications, what we call data at rest, data in use, data in transit, data in motion. You have to have an architecture, a cryptography map, if you will. Well, where am I using PKI? Where is my data in the clear, exposed? Once you have that map, now you can determine what is the applicability of a quantum resilient algorithm. Are there vendors out there? Yes. Are there tools? Okay, what is the budget? What does a proof of concept project look like I did for the Air Force when we're moving files from one end to the other? Well, what is the overhead? A lot of applications will break, like a Salesforce. If when I did that around the world, we were protecting Salesforce with encryption and tokenization. So as I summarize this, is a lot of companies don't even know how to use encryption, today's encryption, or tokenization or data masking. It adds bits into their application field. For an example, a social security number. You want to protect those digits, but if you add quantum resilient, it's going to add extra bits. That breaks the application. So you can't go out of business. You may have to re-architect your application. So a lot of companies are trying to figure out, how do I get ahead of this? How do I make my infrastructure, my data, my cloud applications, and my user experience secure using quantum resilient algorithms, but do not compromise the experience? Apps are breaking. There's a delay in how quickly things can respond because my ecosystem is one iteration behind. So as you look at this, you say, okay, there is a demand. The White House has put it out under the last administration that all federal agencies have to go quantum resilient. Give them a 5-year kind of a timeline. So the ship has already sailed. The commercial sector is trying to figure it out because it's a huge undertaking. Imagine, people say, what's your cybersecurity posture? They don't even know that. Where's my front door locked? Is my back door open? Is my side door, kind of halfway open? Now imagine trying to do a cryptography posture. They have no clue who has the keys, how they're generated, the strength of the keys. So that's where DUSA came in and said, look, take a step back. Map out where you are today, see where quantum resilience fits. Now, let's see where your business is trying to go with AI, whether you're using generative or you're going to use agentic, the workflows, the automation piece. Because if you start to put in the wrong AI components and they automate everything, and your cybersecurity policies aren't mapped to that, then you're going to be in a very, very bad state. You're going to leave doors open that you had no idea were even. So that to me is cryptography posture for quantum resilience. Map it to your AI infrastructure, how that's evolving, whether it's still in generative or if you're going agentic. Look at those vendors. And that then will allow you to make an overall policy of the data set itself. Is it toxic? Is it biased? Is there context around it? What are my inference policies stating? If these things don't make sense to you, you're already behind the 8 ball. You're dealing with what we used to call, you're still on premise with legacy systems, 3-tier architectures. You're not even gone to the cloud, let alone preparing your business to move forward into the next decade or so. So let me pause right there because I rattled off a lot, but I'd be glad to share more.
No, that's excellent. And so there, it would be good to learn more about your ideal customer profile. But I guess why I'm asking that, the Wall Street companies, or the Fortune 100, Fortune 200, even Fortune maybe 500 or Global 2000, these companies most likely have the resources to make sure they don't get caught flat-footed when around this. So around these issues, quantum threat. So I'm sure that they're all over that today. And then there's, smaller businesses, small and medium-sized financial services firms, medical practices, and that want to leverage AI, and they might even have AI already in their business around shadow IT. But how do they avoid being caught flat-footed? In other words, what steps do they need to take to avoid being caught flat-footed?
A great question. Everybody's going to follow the leaders. That's the way it's always been in Silicon Valley. It's a copycat system out there. All vendors, all vertical markets copy each other. We used to have yes, once upon a time I used to work for Cisco, and they used to say, you're not going to get fired, just like IBM, like you said. You don't get fired for hiring the leaders in their market territory, or what Gartner says their magic quadrants. So it's a copycat lead. And what I mean by that is I used to train the Accentures, the Deloittes, build practices in Europe, and we see the struggles that they have of how do you build a practice? How do you then build a service organization? Because a lot of the enterprises and the mid-tiers do not have the resources, do not have the budget. They need something automated, something they can trust. And that's when they come to services like mine. What we do is we'll do the assessment. We'll give you that posture. Here's your weaknesses, here's your strengths, where does your business want to go? And is how long will it take, given the tool sets that you have? Which tool sets are redundant? So you've got three of everything. So that's that thing. But what we really try to get an understanding of is your business value mapping to your IT posture. If you can't map those two things, and what I mean by that is your IT systems are more of a operation backdoor. They're not a value add to your front door where customers are interfacing with your application, your mobile. You've got two of everything. Number one, reduce that, because that's more opportunity for bugs and entries from bad actors. So that's your assessment right there. What does your solution architecture look like? Where does AI make sense? You don't have to go all in with the agentic or the generative. What makes sense? Can you even support it? So that's number two. Can you introduce that analytics layer and the insights and the inferences? Number three is what a lot of the tech companies in Silicon Valley and vendors around the world, they talk about this, but they miss it. Fortunately, it's part of my journey from Sony to Cisco to some of the other companies. I've been focused on content. What I mean by that is I used to lead digital signage around the world for Cisco. And we used to talk about user experience. When we talk about video, back then it was flash, data, voice. We are now getting into space-time patches. We're getting into voxels, not just pixels. We're moving from virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality to extended reality. When you look at avatars in the digital domain, when you talk to a doctor, it may be an avatar, it may be AI derived. The language model that avatar uses to interface with you, to talk with you, to suggest something maybe you need some well-being training. As a veteran, we do a lot of this with PTSD for veterans. So where I'm going with this, you cannot have that language compromised. You say the wrong word, you could have a detrimental outcome. So when you look at that technology stack that I just kind of outlined, this is where things are going. How does a small enterprise or a large enterprise even tackle this? And that's why I come back to that assessment. Let's do a workshop. 4 hours, may take a day if you get the right players involved from the ownership of those different teams and operations. Do a reality assessment of where you are today, How many tools do you have, and where do you want to be in 6 months, 1 year, 18 months, 2 years? Some of the other companies may be a longer timeline, FedGov, if you will. But for a small medium enterprise, it may be like a 2 hour workshop, 3 hour workshop, maybe one or two people. You go in there, you give them that initial checklist. Okay, bring this to the meeting. Security posture, infrastructure, what iterations, what tools, where do you want to be? It's quite simple when you break it down like that, and usually what takes people like a couple of years to map that out. I could do it probably in an hour or two because I can't screw in a light bulb, but I can look at this and say it's like it's transparent to me. You can see it from a mile away. And the challenge is a lot of these guys that are in the technology space right now, they've missed those last couple of decades of actually building these things out. They got a real good textbook version of it that's jumping right into AI and quantum resilience. But they have no idea of the spaghetti networks that are out there. They're kind of hodgepodge, mishmashed, connected to cloud here and there. The policies are all over the place. So you get a handle of that. Now you're in a step to move on a solid footing, because otherwise you got a deck of cards and your business will fail.
Understand and agree. So it seems like what you're suggesting here is so a CEO or a founder of a company, he wants to leverage secure AI and quantum resilient communications. So you're suggesting that before they start experimenting with technologies and solutions, they need to build or have um, a vision for their cybersecurity or their risk.
I would take it a step higher. The three trends that I would suggest, my recommendation is aligning the business and IT value based outcomes. If you cannot map those sales, marketing, product, and customer success teams mapping to an IT tool set or policy, you're already behind the eight ball. That is, the buzzwords of how do I drive revenue, how do I minimize costs, and how do I make things efficient. AI will be the key component in that. But if you can't articulate the business to IT mapping, you're cooked. The second thing is the evolution of information systems themselves, the AI, the cybersecurity, and the experience that I talk about. If you can't map those evolutionary layers of how do I get from on-prem to cloud to the decentralization to the what I would call data gravity, where processing of GPU and CPUs at the endpoint, your mobile devices, sensors on wearables. If you can't map that out with the information architecture, you're behind the eight ball. Number three is autonomous systems. What's your ethics? What is your baseline for saying this is toxic, this is bias, this is disinformation? The observability, then how do you actually monitor, measure, quantify that? And then the third part of that under the autonomous systems is business continuity. How do you recover from an attack? What's your operations? Where are you storing your data in Europe, in America? Which cloud services? And for guys like me who are veterans or former military, we look at multi-domain, space, air, terrestrial, and subterranean. What does that implicate for the communication network, the data within that communication network, which applications, and if you have to share that with your ecosystem? We used to stream into the cockpit of an airplane, or we're going to stream into an aircraft carrier on the Mediterranean, or we're going to go under into subterranean. So if you look at those dimensions of reality and where things are trending, if you don't have that business to IT based outcomes already defined, those metrics, where you are in the evolution of your information system, and can you do this autonomously? Basically, the DevSecOps, the AI ops. Can you introduce code? Can you go through that pipeline? Can you go into production if in an autonomous way? And that's where the agentic AI plays a key role in all three of those areas.
Understand? So, a lot here to chew on, and I certainly appreciate your perspective on things. So, I guess the regulated industries, healthcare, finance, government, do they have any unique challenges, being in a regulated market when they're adapting AI securely?
If you look at AI, right, it's just an application. It's just a software capability with a few algorithms. The key thing is garbage in, garbage out. The data sets you put in, the large language models or small language models or proprietary to your business will determine, how you will then derive an output, an insight based upon what you put in. Now, a lot of that could be false papers out there on the internet. A lot of that's what I call the garbage going in. Um, where you come into the cybersecurity part of that is the risk. And this is where the regulated industries like FedGov, higher education, the healthcare industry, pharmaceuticals, if you will. When I used to ask them, what's your risk tolerance? They go, what do you mean? I go, how strong do you want to make the protection layer? Are you always used to use the analogy of an old school medieval knight? If you put too much armor on them, they can't lift up their sword or shield. I go, yeah, but the arrows can't. Well, it's a utility. Can they still function while they've got the security measures in place? So what I mean by that is how many layers of security do you want? The strength of what we call the ciphers, initialization vectors. How strong do you want to make it? Because there's a cost. That means there's more processing, more CPU cycles, more GPU cycles. So that's what I talk about mapping it back to the business. There's a cost associated with every compute cycle you use, whether it's to create an encryption algorithm, whether it's to process the data in AI, whether it's to create an output in a format that you understand, video, voice, text, things like that. If you cannot map that, then you're just throwing tools and technologies and experimenting and build it and they will come. Yeah, we've seen that, been there, done that. There's a better way to approach this and to map your GRC or cybersecurity policy to your key components, the key components being the data set, the information. What does it take to process it? How do you analyze it? Which tools of AI do you use? Do you build it in-house? Do you outsource it? And then how do you operationalize all this so in the event of a disaster or an attack, your restore time, your response times, how quickly can you keep the business going? So it's not just cybersecurity, GRCs, hospitals, and I got to protect your data. You got to look at it holistically. Yes, there's a HIPAA requirement, but all people just say is, oh, I got to protect the sensitive data. And they leave the comments field unprotected. Oh, let me make a note to myself. Social security number is this. He's using credit card number this. Even though your fields are protected, but your comment section is wide open. As an example. So that's what I talk about. Do you really understand your applications, your network, your authentication policies, and then put a risk score. Where do you want to be? And then the CEO and the powers that be in that company have to sign off on that. If your risk tolerance and what you report to Wall Street, because you got to meet XYZ and still be compliant, that's the dance right there.
Understand. So, in cybersecurity, there is a talent gap, skills shortage, which is well publicized. But with the emergence of AI, there's no shortage of AI companies. So, what do you think differentiates firms that will endure in this space versus those who will disappear?
So I got like about 3 or 4 friends that got pumped 50 million, 100 million. They're CEOs of companies, and they're the leaders of cybersecurity AI. They kind of pivoted from the cloud access security broker space, CASB space, that we used to use proxies for. And they're all touting, and their messages are all the same. And I look at them, I walk with them, I talk with them, at these shows, and I'll harken back to what I just said. Is they're great technologists. They have no clue. And I say this with all due respect, what the content or the user experience versus the business parameter. They may have a good idea of business parameters, but they're coming at it Silicon Valley tech head. They're coming at it from bits, bytes, speeds, feeds, or quantum bits. And as you have to level up, and that's why I was talking about extended realities. You have to understand the user experience. If I have to keep clicking a button and nothing works, it doesn't matter my policies and what I'm doing from a tool set. And what happens is you'll end up with tool sprawl. You'll end up with 5 tools doing the same thing because you got different departments don't talk to each other. So in the Silicon Valley, there, if you look at it, it's all about policy. It's all about automating the policy. It's all about, can I take my InfoSec policy, my information security policy, 100 pages, 200 pages, whatever it may be, run that through my AI and say, okay, now apply it to my cloud applications, to my network infrastructure. The number one thing that we're seeing is workflow automation. That's the big push, because we can minimize now the number of redundant steps from an efficient standpoint. We see then the same tools being used and the policies are not the same. That's where AI comes in. And now how do we be prescriptive into overlay a policy? That's what the vendors are coming up with right now. And they're clouding it with all this technical jargon. Oh, let's protect your microservices or your containers or your applications or your infrastructure. So there's a lot there as you look at it holistically, especially from a solution architect's mind. And that's where they're primarily driving it from. If you look at the guys like the Microsofts, the Googles, the Metas, I think things like that, the Amazons, they're coming at it. How do we sell more services? How do you use our compute stack? And then how do you leverage that into your enterprise? So they've got their own mantra and their own mission statement. And typical Silicon Valley style, there'll be companies that will then enable those large players. We'll collapse their cloud footprint because we'll have a product or a service that will combine multiple features into one product. That's what we did when we lifted and shifted from on-prem to cloud. We just clapped all the legacy hardware into a software stack. We're going to do the same thing now with cybersecurity, AI, and the application zones, if you will, the layers. We're going to collapse that into new tools, new products, and that's what I'm excited about. It's like rebuilding the internet from 30 years ago from scratch. We get to do it because we can do it in software and not just rely on the constraints of hardware back then.
Wow. I mean, that's really great. You essentially answered my next question. So if you had to fast forward to 2027, what do you think the AI communication technology will look like, or how will it be different?
It's we follow the principles, this foundational, fundamental principles of when you go into the cloud or anything and into the internet. That's why I talked about Blue Coat back in the day when after 9/11, we were securing country data. I was going into China, Saudi Arabia, Europe, aircraft carriers. We used to start out with filtering. Then we started to inspect, monitor, like whether it was streaming video, whether it was chat or messaging, whether it was from a traditional web search. And now it's the same thing with AI. We're going to have pipelines that go into those where your inference policies are of what you allow, the scoring of toxicity, bias, contextuality. In about 2 years, these things will be sorted out because we'll start to understand false positives. Right now, we're taking a hit on the chin, just like we did with shadow IT, there's shadow AI. A lot of things are getting through, but that's where Silicon Valley and others around the world will bring up these new products and capabilities. And for me, I just have to look backward to say, oh, that's how we approached it in the 90s and the 2000s, 2010s. Let's use those fundamental principles because they're based on sound, logic, tangible results. But now we update the language, the vocabulary, new ontologies, new semantics, and now we just apply it to the current technology stack. Okay, we rebrand it, put a new coat of paint on it, and so we market it a little different, but it's the same fundamental principles. Like Elon Musk talks about the physics principles, the scientific methodologies. The internet is the same. You still got to calculate a byte, a bit. And if you go into the quantum layer, you got to understand what the qubit cost is. So when we look at AI and we look at 4 bytes, okay, how much does it cost to compute that? Where are you computing that? At the edge or in the cloud or some other, in a low Earth orbit? So once you start understanding that, there's new products required. Same thing, but they're in software. Load balancers, proxies, route switch, firewalls. They're just going to have an upgraded name. It's going to be called a quantum proxy, as an example. And it's going to have an AI inference enabled. So that's the marketing guys will do that. But if you really understand the fundamentals of this, you can already see the timeline. You can already see, okay, if I invest here, here's where the market will be. Here's where the products, to your point, in about a year, 2 years, they're planting the seed of space-time patches and extended reality. Here's how video will be consumed in these new environments. It won't be even called video. It'll be called something else. And so now you start to backtrack. Okay, what's the value? Okay, is this based in a sound business logic? Can the business realize with their operations and teams? So you're not just building it for building its sake. And that's what I see in about 2 years. We'll have stability in our AI because new products will emerge. They'll have matured before the 1.0 and 2.0 versions. Now you can really get into the autonomous part that I was talking about. Policies, monitoring, fix things as they occur in real time, and that's the trend. So new companies, a lot of the consolidation, just like we had after 9/11, the first time around. In the collapse of the dot-coms, you'll see a consolidation of smart companies, smart individuals, smart tech that add real value. And that's where the opportunity lies. And that's where I was talking about it being really exciting because we're just at the starting point. This is like when the first web browser came out. Oh, what do you mean I don't need a dial-up modem to stream video? Really? I could stream a megabits per second? And so it's that's what's exciting. And as I look around the globe and I look at the different industries and vertical markets and I look at the infrastructure, they're still stuck. They move slow, because they're big behemoths. They're big, enterprises. So for them they have a lot of legacy infrastructure. They're still on-prem. Half of them haven't even gone to full-blown cloud. Some of them figured out the cloud is too expensive. They're bringing it back on-prem, like you're seeing the giant data centers, and now being more green, more environment friendly. And so that investment is taking place right now. They're starting to build the roads again, like we did 30 years ago. And now the opportunity is, okay, where are the gaps in those roads? Oh, I need a toll booth. That's a firewall. Oh, that's an AI firewall. That's a quantum firewall. So those are going to collapse into software-only products. And those who understand this space and understand that flow, like I talked about, the infrastructure, the information flow, are going to reap the benefits.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, and I mean, data centers. I haven't even used that word in in quite a while, but that's great. So, I mean, you kind of were all around this, but let me just ask you specifically. You kind of answered it, but what is the one piece of advice you'd give a CIO or a CISO that's listening and trying to embrace both AI and stay ahead of the security curve?
Be bold. I know they don't want to hear it. The most CIOs, or not CIOs, the CISOs, that they're risk averse, and rightly so. They got a lot of responsibilities, but if they're worth their weight in salt and they've spent time in the technology space and they understand, like I just described, the technology for what it really is, you can be bold to where you can get rid of your tool sprawl because you don't understand what you have and you don't know what it does, right? So from the CISOs, right, get your security policy, your InfoSec policy in order. Get your house in order from that side, the front door and the back door. Your IT operations and what the business applications are doing. Number one. To the CIOs, right? When I talked to the biggest tech companies here about 4 years ago, do you understand quantum resilience? They thought I was talking Martian. They're like, what are you talking about? So it told me where their heads at. Their responsibilities are to their shareholders, day-to-day operations, keep the ship afloat. You have to have an emerging technology or a pivot, a small team, to iterate quickly. Prototype, proof of concept, minimal viable products. Get that feedback in right away. Iterate quickly. That's what I would say to the CIOs because they're not going to understand. They don't even understand what a voxel is. So where is the threat of a pixel versus a voxel? How do you attack it? If you're not thinking like that, if you're not thinking of move it, target defenses, and that is not your vocabulary, you need to get there. To the CEOs, it's like a strategic. They're thinking three, five, not only tactical, but they gotta be prepared because they'll go out of business if they're not ready. They'll be the Kodak of the film industry, to use that analogy. And to use a Lord of the Rings line, all that glitters is not gold. Don't fall for the shiny stuff or the architecture stuff. Really have your teams do the diligence of what is practical to your environment. You may find that the best tools out there do not fit one for one because you got a spaghetti junction in your infrastructure. That's why we had to build SDN, software defined networks. We had to virtually build overlays because the hodgepodge stuff. So if you're one of those CEOs and CIOs and CISOs and you understand you have a hodgepodge of infrastructure, a hodgepodge of applications, how do you think you're just going to pick a vendor from AI or cybersecurity and plug it in and it's going to solve that? You're delusional. So that's where I would say get a small team, put them together, pick an organization. Like when I was at Rocket, we had 150 companies. I was doing the policies for 75 of them. So get a consistent policy framework in place that's adaptable, flexible. Because what's happened is if you may be in North America, but if you're a multinational, you got to go by GDPR in Europe. You got to go by different regulations where you may not be able to use tokenization or encryption or even quantum resilience because of their regulations over there, because of the compliance requirements for that vertical. And you have no idea what that will do to your application. It'll break it, will stop your business. So when you back up, CISOs, be bold. Take a look at what you have, streamline your budget, and really get ahead of this with a small team. CIOs, look at your information, content, data, and how will this be consumed at the endpoint, not only with your IT teams, but your customers and your partners. And the CEOs have to be really clear-minded that AI is not a stopgap. It's not something that's a fly-by-night. It will evolve as the data centers and these AI investments take place. There's going to be whole new industries emerge, just like when we first built the networks 30 years ago.
So the infrastructure that is going to be built going forward needs to be very flexible, and it needs to be able to adapt to new technologies that are going to be emerging, very often.
We're lucky that when we went to cloud did that for us. It virtualized that entire, in the old days, I was racking and stacking servers all day long in a data center. We're serving another million streams. Oh, holy cow, we got to get more equipment, physically rack stack. Now we got auto scaling. We got serverless. We can go decentralized. We can use compute cycles from different data centers. That's the investment being made right now. Once those come online, that problem of auto scaling, always on, always available, meeting demand will be solved because we've learned our lessons for the last 15, 20 years in cloud. What works, what doesn't work. Pipelines, data pipelines. We understand serial versus parallel. We learned the hard way of getting all this sensor data, all this data from your mobile phones, from your televisions, from your refrigerator, from your automobiles. We know how to handle that now. So these new data centers that are being built up to analyze that data gravity, that volume of data coming in, and to infer, okay, what would an outcome be if decent data, reliable data, good data coming in, you process it now, how can that be consumed? That will be the next step. Then these new companies will emerge from the application side. You can use it in this fashion. You can use it in this fashion. You can share it with, company XYZ. So that richness of that content of your information, so you can make better decisions. Those new companies will not emerge until the AI data centers are built. And that investment, as you see, the Larry Ellisons, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musk, they're doing that in real time.
Agree, but it's also you need to keep the user experience as part of the formula, and maybe load testing or performance testing will be coming back, but or maybe it is still around. I was in the testing space for a while, but
I flipped that about 7 years ago. There was this whole notion. We were still in legacy world. You would build functionality in a product, and then you would go load and performance. I go, no. And there's videos out there. I talk about it. I called it secure and fast. They go, hey, Sonny, what do you mean by that? I go, build your functionality. This is where I talk about the DevSecOps pipeline, right? The CI/CD and all that. I go, build your functionality, then do your security testing, and then do your load and performance. People used to do it backwards. They'll build the product, do the load and performance, then they bolt on security. And remember when I talked about everything breaking? So, okay, now your application breaks faster. What value is there? So I called it secure and fast, and we showed it at Mobile World Congress in Spain. And this is when in cybersecurity, when all the security, orchestration, and automation and response, the SOAR category came out. And that was my number one problem when we would deploy functionality and we introduce encryption or tokenization. Everybody would blame me or my team. They go, you're slowing down the response time for that user. You're slowing things down. When we really found out it was legacy policies on the infrastructure. They would time out going to the cloud. A Salesforce query might take a minute, might take a minute and a half, and you're terminating that connection because your old IT policy said time out in 30 seconds. So the reality of build your functionality, test the security posture based upon your requirements and your industry and your vertical markets and your regulations, then do the load and performance. The load and performance, I used to use a company called Exedian. Cisco acquired them about a couple of years ago because they could get granular and take the blame off of me. Is it at the object level? Is it at the server level? Or is it at the network level? The round trip times. And then I could aggregate them and show them, look, it's timing out on your firewall, or it's timing out at your proxy, or it's timing out at your cloud application layer that you have. At your SaaS, it's not responding. So to your point, functionality, test of security, load and performance, you get in production. And that pipeline, using AI to create the agentic workflow to say, okay, where do we take the human out of the loop? Where can we automate this and still have oversight, but how quickly can we recover? That's why I was talking about that part of the autonomous component.
Nice. So tell me just a little bit about, I'm just very curious, your ideal customer profile and the persona that you would approach within these, that you work with within these ideal customer profile accounts or.
It's anywhere Fortune 1000s, right? And it's ideally it will be the CIO and the CISO, because you want to, I'll just say it to say it, you have to make them the champions. They're the ones responsible and own it. And then eventually the investment is from the CEO or the CFO, whoever is responsible for that decision. But the CIO and the CISO, they have to be bold. If they're not bold, they're going to be risk averse. And I understand that. There is respect for being very logical, predictive, but at the same time, you're going into a brave new world. This is blue ocean. This is going into what Silicon Valley used to be built on, right? We used to take initiative, take risks, calculated risks. We don't want to, have the aircraft crash, So we are conscious of that, and that's why I talk about prototyping, proof of concept, minimal viable product quickly. And you can break off a team called emerging technologies. And that's where we would come in. We would assess that, and then we can advise on which tools are here in Silicon Valley. And what we're doing is building the tool set that does the assessment. So use AI, take all those inputs. Here's what you need to do right now. And then a secondary thing where I'm going is thought long and hard about this, but then creating the service, just like Jay did, Zscaler. When he started that, I was talking to him, and they go, okay, some of my senior guys went there when they first started Zscaler, and I'm like, okay, you're doing the monitoring. You're just basically an offshoot from what they have on-prem, and you got policies there. You do the inspection. Same thing what I told Eric Wan when he started Zoom. He was in the next building into us. I go, Eric, you guys going to do this? You need a cybersecurity layer. And so what I'm sharing with you, there's innovators at the C technologists that became CEOs, and there's business guys that became CEOs. So my footprint is the CIO and CISO in that room because they're the ones that you want to make look like champions. They're the ones that need to win because then the business wins. And then the CEO, obviously they have the business acumen and the strategic vision of what that business provides, and then you want to make sure the IT ontology, the vocabulary, the semantics align with their business vision. If they're misaligned, it's a disaster waiting to happen. So that's my Fortune 1000 CISOs, CIOs to start with.
I understand. Excellent. Well, Sonny, thank you again for your truly insightful discussion. Your expertise is invaluable for anybody navigating the complexities of secure AI and the quantum threat. So, Sonny, where can our listeners find you online?
Oh, you can go to dosanjhusa.com. I'll be starting a series of talks, and I'll be sharing my vision. I'll write a few papers. So that's where you can find me. And I also volunteer a lot in the American Legion. For a lot of us who have suffered from trauma or PTSD, you can go to my veteranscourage.org website where I talk about how do you help a veteran? How do you help their families? How do you help from the homeless side get back on their feet? How do we use these technologies to reach them where they're at? So there's two avenues. One is the business side, dosanjhusa.com, and then the volunteer giving back, the veteranscourage.org.
Okay, that's great. So, to our listeners, thank you for joining us. If you found this discussion valuable, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and share this episode with somebody who you might find that would benefit from it. So, we encourage you to connect with Sonny, and don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, stay cyber resilient and keep innovating. Thank you so much, Sonny. It was really a great conversation.
Thank you. Appreciate it.